Hello everyone. So before the actual episode of Backtracking starts, I want to talk about the UFC reviews. So obviously there was a UFC on last night. I haven't been spoiled on the results, and like I said in a previous video, I would like to do them through watching them online because, like, even though it will be slightly spoiled, I'll still be able to enjoy it. But yeah, don't be surprised if they don't come as frequently, because I was hoping to get watched today and I just didn't. Kept getting distracted, and yeah, I'll probably watch it and review it tomorrow. But by tomorrow, I imagine most of it will be spoiled. So I am still going to do them. I was initially doubting it, but no, I'm definitely sure I'm going to do them. Ultimate Fighter episode reviews will probably be easier to do because they'll be a lot less cumbersome. Because the site I use to watch things MMA Core has like it can be a little bit clogged at times with the fights, so you have to like really backtrack a little bit. No pun intended, by the way, to actually find all the fights on the card. So it might be a bit of an issue, but I'll get used to it. So yeah, I don't really have a lot else to say. We'll get to the actual episode of Backtracking, but thank you for taking the time out to listen to my rambling. Let's not make this any longer than it needs to be. As South Park once said, there's no Canada like French Canada, or as it's called, Quebec, more specifically Montreal, and that's where we are for this episode. Simple Plan first formed in 1999 from the ashes of a band called Reset, which is weird to say since Reset are still kind of around. Still, most of those members left to form Simple Plan. My own first Simple Plan song, much like my first Hollywood Undead song, wasn't even from an album, but was from a movie. That movie was Scooby-Doo 2 Monsters Unleashed, and the song was Don't Want to Think About You. Then, a few years later, Shut Up popped up on Kerrang, and I noticed a slight style change and how different the band looked as well. I also sort of fell for the band by that point. These guys were legit my favourite band once, and they're definitely still in my personal top 5 at least. With that said, let's get another sort of not blind episode out of the way. It's Backtracking, and this time it's Simple Plan. Let's face the music. We start with the band's debut album titled No Pads, No Helmets, Just Balls. Released in 2002 through the band's signature labels of Lava and Atlantic and produced by Arnold Lanny, this would wind up being a good starting point for the band. It immediately shows their signature solid pop punk mixed with other pop and rock elements and even a little bit of emo because this was the early 2000s, where even the happiest sounding pop punk band was considered emo. I think some Flying One managed to get away with not being labelled that, which is weird because their stuff is arguably more serious. Anyway, not only do we get the band's signature genres from the get-go, but we also get their signature lineup, which hasn't changed since they actually started. Lead singer Pierre Bouvier, lead guitarist Jeff Stinko, rhythm guitarist Sebastien Lefavre, bassist David Desrosiers, and drummer Chuck Camo. This band have kept that lineup since the start, and since they're almost 20 years old now, not amongst themselves but as a band, that's a really impressive feat nowadays. Speaking of signature things, we get the usual Simple Plan structuring of songs, but for their debut, they had a lot more of an angsty sound, so to speak. One thing that it got right here and would improve upon later was the use of backup vocals, mostly provided by Seb and David. The two do such a good job of complementing Pierre's own voice. Sure, there are some production tricks that hide that and make it sound double-tracked, and it does do a good job of making you believe that Pierre is singing over himself, as is the case with most bands of pop punk. But it's not as overblown here. It feels more genuine and like nobody's really hungering a spotlight of any sorts. It helps the structuring as well as the backing vocals crash together well with the instrumental work. There's a lot of care that's been put into the right kind of sound for each song, and with the lyrics mostly covering girlfriends and relationships, that's difficult to pull off. Having said that, there is some confusion in terms of the songs. I'm Just a Kid is a good example. There are many different versions of the song that change a line or two, but the main thing to listen out for is at the end. In one version, there's something of a backing guitar solo to help guide the song's last chorus before it ends. In another, that backing thing is kind of gone, and it's just very hard to hear over everything else. Still, no matter which version of the song you find, you'll probably enjoy it because it's one of my favourite Simple Plan songs. It's just really good. Pierre's vocals have a certain earnest quality to them without being too whiny, and whilst his range wasn't as good at this point, his emotion was and still is palpable. Jeff's riffs and licks are good, with even some good solos here and there. Seb's own riffs are good, but his chucking rhythm guitar work is a great standout too. David is, in my opinion, a very underrated bassist, especially in pop punk, playing with a fun balance and a good groove, and Chuck's drumming has just got a really good punk feel to it, showing a great fast pace when needed and having good slow moments too. Then its songs include Grow Up, God Must Hate Me, the great closing song in Perfect, Addicted, and my favourite in I'm Just a Kid. With their debut, the band lived up to the album's title, just going balls in and hoping that would work. And it did. I mean, what more could you ask for when your album title is based on a saying in rugby? I can recommend this one. Next is the band's second album, Still Not Getting Any. Released in 2004, the label stayed the same, but the producer changes as Bob Rock is behind the booth for this one. This was also my first full Simple Plan album through and through. Actually, me and a group of friends fell for the band around the same time, and a friend of mine named Luke actually had a copy of the album, so he let me borrow it. I listened to that thing twice on the first day of having it, and it took me a good amount of time to return it. In that time, the box was slightly cracked, but at least the disc was mostly fine and it could still be held in the box. I think they let me keep it anyway because it took me so long to return it. Granted, I'm now a lot more careful with things involving discs, but yeah, that was a thing that happened. In case you can tell from me saying that I listened to this thing twice in one day, I really like this album. The title is yet another clever sex pun, but it's also based more on the band's feelings that they still weren't getting any actual good publicity at the same time. Not that that bothers them, as they consider any publicity will always be the good kind, so no reason to complain unless you're Conor McGregor the other day. But we'll not talk about that. Actually, that line with the publicity would lend itself to different lyrical subject matter for this album. There is still the odd song here and there about relationships, but it's mostly stuff about shoving it back in the faces of critics, addressing problems of the media, and stuff of that nature. Also, yes, this album contains that song. You know, that one. If you don't know, it's called Untitled, or in brackets, How Could This Happen to Me, and I guarantee that even the least experienced Simple Plan fan knows this song. It's been used so much in a memey way on YouTube and in other things that I don't know whether to be mad about people appreciating the song like a joke, even though it's about drunk driving and the dangers of that, or happy that people are even using the song at all. In terms of structuring, it's more punk rock anyway. The album, not the song. There is slower stuff, but there's also a lot of heavy and fast-paced things too, and with different tones for different messages, it's handled really well. There's even some experimentation done with the backing vocals too, with some good gang vocal work here and there, and more melodies and harmonies backing up some of the verses, courtesy of David Desrosiers, whose own voice has improved quite a lot. And it's usually well and to good effect. It's not present on all songs, which I like, and it's as balanced as the album itself. Pierre's own vocals sound more unique and carry a lot more range to them while still keeping their emotion and sense of fun. The guitar work of Seb and Jeff is great, with Jeff having some freaking great guitar solos and just awesome riffs from both. Dave's bass work is still great, having more of a role this time around and hammering things on with good scales and drives. And Chuck's speed and sheer bloody work rate behind the kit is apparent from the start, showing a sense of fun and good balance as well. Standout songs include Shut Up, Welcome to My Life, Thank You, Jump, and my favourite, and Promise, which has a great guitar solo. Still not getting any takes everything that the band's debut had and amplified the best parts while adding in some awesome new stuff too, experimenting a little bit but not too much. I can easily recommend this one. Yep. Next is Simple Plan's third album, Simple Plan. Released in 2008, it's another story of the same labels but different producers as Dave Fortman, Danja, and Max Martin take over for this one. Having said that, former producer Arnold Lanny actually co-writes most of the songs on the album, and it's not in a good way. In fact, this album is a major shift in sound, aiming for a more rock feel in places. It's a bit more experimental, but unlike the previous album where it was experimental without tampering too badly with the overall sound of the band, this is the polar opposite. In fact, the only two songs to not feature outside interference from Lanny are the most Simple Plan sounding songs on the album, those being Time to Say Goodbye and I Can Wait Forever. The former is the most pop-punk sounding song on the album, and the latter is the biggest ballad amongst a sea of way too damn many of them. There was enough ballads on Still Not Getting Any, but we had that balance with more fun sounding tracks. In this one, it's a similar balance but without the element of fun. You kind of get this feeling that Lanny was trying to do way too much at once, basically being that superhero in a movie that just wants to help even though they don't really have powers, and that's coming from a guy who thinks that Hawkeye is kind of underrated. It tries too hard. Not only is the new sound a bad call, but the production is kind of weird as well. There are too many hip-hop and pop-influenced beats that the actual instruments have to follow along with, and it feels really bland at times. When it comes to songwriting, I don't mind other people being involved, but there is such a thing as helping out so much, and there's no doubt that executive meddling was involved as well. Still, when the instruments actually do have a chance to get going, they sound really solid in terms of structure. There's enough guitar solos and good riffs to balance out the questionable choices and beats leading into songs, and the band actually sounds still pretty good. But they would sound better if the production wasn't trying its damnedest to just bury everything else. Hell, it could have even been their own version of Does This Look Infected by Sum 41. That's the potential that this album has. In terms of lyrics, it's more of the same stuff, with more focus on darker and serious themes such as betrayal, losing loved ones, and wanting to escape a negative space. Same old, but with a more serious feel. The members, as mentioned, perform well. Pierre's vocals sound pretty good, and he carries a bit more range and tells more serious stories. Jeff's riffs and solos are also mainly a good background to things. Seb's own riffs are stellar, playing good rhythms and the like. Dave's bass is also good and has a nice depth to it, but it feels a bit drowned out by the production. And Chuck's drumming is once again great, with heavy hitting and good speed, but it's hard to tell sometimes if it's him or a production trick playing a drum loop. Standard songs include Save You, When I'm Gone, Take My Hand, The Great Closure, and What If, and my favourite, In Time to Say Goodbye. Despite the self-titled approach, it's not a lazy album, and it does have a charm and heart somewhere to it, but it suffers from trying to take itself too seriously and too much executive meddling and unflattering production choices, despite the great performances. I can still recommend this one, but it does take some getting used to. Next is the band's fourth album, Get Your Heart On. Released in 2011, the band stayed with both the Lover and the Atlantic with a new producer in Brian House. This is also the band's shortest album at 37 minutes and 45 seconds. You know, something sounds off about that. Its title is an obvious dick joke, but it's also the band's shortest album. Anyway, much like the band's self-titled effort, these songs were co-written with people, but this time it's people who actually know what they're doing. It's not the same person on too many actual songs. There are too many writers to mention, and the only song written fully by the band on the album is the song Last One Standing, which is still pretty good. But this is the band's first album to feature guest appearances, and before I go to them, I know Joel Madden from Good Child sort of appeared on You Don't Mean Anything from No Pets and Mistress Balls, but he's not listed in the wiki, and after several listens of that song, it's hard to actually hear him. Maybe he took more of a background role? I don't know, but let's get back to this one. Rivers Cuomo of Weezer features on the song Can't Get My Hands Off You. Alex Gaskell from All Time Low appears on Freaking Me Out. Caribbean rapper Kanan, I hope I'm saying that right, appears on the song Summer Paradise. And pop singer Natasha Bedingfield appears on the song Jet Lag. If those guest appearances were enough of the giveaway, then now would be a good time to tell you that Get Your Heart On might be the band's poppiest release and not in the weird pop rock trio crossover that plagued their previous album. This album is poppy in the punky and catchy way. Hell, it's probably the easiest album by the band to get into because of that. There are parts of it that feel very diet no pads, but that doesn't mean that it won't make you fat if you just sit down and listen to it and talk about it on the internet and to a small audience who probably don't even care. Sorry, I had a weird thing there. But yeah, this album is very catchy indeed, and it's more tailored to getting more audiences to try and listen. Even in terms of lyrics, things have a more pop feel, and there's more of what they explored in Simple Plan, but told a bit better and mixed well with the fun that the band had on notepads and still not getting any. And they sound like they're having a lot of fun on Get Your Heart On. Yeah. I mean, if you can't find fun in making an erection joke for an album title, then nobody's really having fun, and that just sucks. Pierre's vocals still sound pretty good, with much less processing and letting him actually sing more, which is good. Jeff doesn't have any solos, but he has good riffs and plays some good lead licks as well. Seb's on guitar work is still stellar, with good riffs and backing up the others. David's bass is always good, with the deep groove and trying new things as well, and Chuck's drumming sounds great too, with more speed and timing, and a good performance behind the kits. Standout songs include Jet Lag, Can't Get My Hands Off You, the great closing song in this song Save My Life, Astronaut, and my favourite in the song Loser of the Year. Get Your Heart On is a good example of Simple Plan as a whole, really. It's catchy, fun, has good lyrics, and it's got great production value, and is just really easy to pick up and listen to. I can recommend this one. Finally, we reach the band's fifth album, Taking One for the Team. Released in 2016, we get a slight label change as this one was only released for Atlantic, with Love and Nowhere to Be Seen. The album was produced by Howard Benson and Ryan Stewart, and it's the band's longest album at 47 minutes and 12 seconds. And hooray, we have another sex joke album title. Woo! So yeah, not only is the album the longest in terms of time, but it also has more tracks than any other Simple Plan album with a total of 14, and it also contains the largest time gap between albums with 5 years since Get Your Heart On. You think that the time and everything is the only thing that the band went big on? Well, you're wrong. In fact, this is maybe the band's biggest album for anthems, as well as being their riskiest. The first single, I Don't Want to Go to Bed, features rapper Nelly, contains a funk pop feel to it. In fact, the band gets pretty experimental on this one, and it's probably the most bizarre piece of work because of that. And Nelly isn't the only guest star either. Hip-hop duo Our City appear on the song Singing in the Rain, Jordan Pundik from New Found Glory appears on the song Farewell, and Automatic Love Letter singer and The Voice contestant Juliet Sims appears on the closing song I Dream About You. You know what, in retrospect, I guess that the album's title is more fitting because of the more experimental route that it takes. There's the aforementioned influences in I Don't Want to Go to Bed, Singing in the Rain has a very reggae feel to it, and I Don't Want to Be Sad has an odd gospel feel to it, and it works in some strange way. The album goes to so many places, but it never fully put me off when I first listened to it. But at the same time, some of the material here is some of the band's heaviest and fast-paced, with great examples being I Refuse, Nostalgic, and Opinion Overload. Even with that, the song structure of the album just lead to the band's overarching goal of having fun, and the lyrics echo that sentiment. There is obvious subject matter about missing those you love, but the fact that the theme of being in love is present in so many different ways, it keeps that message from being stale. This is maybe the band's most positive sounding album all in all, and that may be part of the reason why it took so long to make it. Well, that and the band's extensive touring schedule, not to mention being married and having children with their wives. Married to their wives, not each other, that'd be weird. Could be anything, really. Pierre's vocals sound good, his lyrics are still as weird but fun as ever, showing a sense of humour and fun which he sings out well. Jeff has at least maybe some solace here, but his riffs are still good with good timing and speed. Seb's own riffs and vocals sound good too, playing along well with everyone else and getting good time to shine. David's bass goes to new places, playing at a good speed and just sounding great. And Chuck's drumming carries a good rhythm structure to things with awesome timing and heavy hits. Standout songs include Nostalgic, I Don't Want to Be Sad, Boom, Opinion Overload, and my favourite in I Refuse. Taking one of the team isn't the best from a technical sense, but it's just a straight up blast of fun while showing the band's maturity combined with good production and solid work from the members. I can recommend this one. So let's round them up, shall we? We shall. Most favourite is still Again. It just has a really nostalgic appeal, and the album itself carried me through my darker times at secondary school. I fell for it when I first heard it, and I still love the album to this day. Least favourite was probably Simple Plan, the album, not the band. They just try to take themselves too seriously, and I do appreciate the experimentation, but it's handled so poorly, not to mention Lenny's co-writing being more hindrance than actual help. Which is a shame, because he does try, sort of. But yeah, really not a lot else to say. Join me next time, or in the next episode of Backtracking, where I'll be doing a more somber episode, as I cover Linkin Park, and then there's 2 parts, and probably the retrospective episode of Season 3 will be, because of Chess's passing last year. So, see you all then. Thank you for listening. You're awesome. Bye bye.